Welcome to Grow Black Leaders,
your go-to source for all things leadership, growth, and development.
for Black leaders, by Black leaders. Let's grow. Welcome to the Grow Black Leaders podcast, where we exist to create a space, a community, an ecosystem for Black leaders to cultivate Black leaders. I am Ronaldo.
And I'm Christian.
And we have the great privilege of hosting this podcast. Look, we understand that leadership itself is complicated. It is complex. And when you add being Black to that, there are specific nuances that you and I encounter. And we're happy to create this space for dialogue to help you on your leadership journey. I am so excited about this conversation today. Y'all will understand in just a moment. My wife and I were talking before this, and I know she's going to say some stuff about this dialogue today with my friend. This is my friend, okay? So we are having a conversation, but this is my dog, Kevin Duhart. Is an amazing man, and I didn't start with his title, but you will get to know him. He's an apostle. He'll tell you a whole lot about himself, but I'm just telling you the man. Kevin Duhart is versatile. He is so much. He isn't just a preacher. He is a businessman. He knows something. He's like a walking encyclopedia. Yes. He knows something about everything. I just be bringing up subject matters to him just to see what he knows about it. He said, well, let me tell you about that, because I was just reading. And as I was drinking my coffee this morning, I was studying. I'm like, you were doing that all before 7 o'clock a.m.? You know, I was just trying to get out of my bed, you know. But I am excited, and you are going to be blessed by this conversation, aren't they?
Gosh, you are definitely going to be blessed by this conversation. As a matter of fact, when I listen to the two of them talk, it is like, it's just so much. I'm like, clearly I'm not reading enough. I need to do more research, because I'm just trying to keep up with the two of y'all. So I know that this is going to be a very rich conversation today.
Welcome to the Black Leaders Podcast, my friend Kevin Duhart.
I'm so happy to be here with you Hardys, man. I love the Hardys, Ro and Ronaldo and Christian, man. I love y'all so very much. You know we do. So this is an honor and a privilege to be a part of. Man, congratulations to y'all on what you're doing, man, with growing Black leaders, man. Congratulations to the two of you guys. This is amazing.
Thank you so much. We are so glad to be doing this, and I'm so glad that we get to have you be a part of this process. Now, I know that I have gotten a chance to know you, and as long as I've known you, I'm still learning more, right? So it's just so many layers to you. I know that some people in our listening audience, they have no idea who you are, and I want them to learn a little bit more about you up front. So for the next few moments, can you just tell our listening audience, who is Kevin Duhart?
In short, man, I'm a kid from the east side of San Antonio, Texas, which is historically known to be the Black side of our city. Grew up in the public schools and whatnot. I'm from the church world in a sense to where my family is predominantly pastors and leaders and musicians and things of that nature. And then I took a different course. You know, I kind of got into music and went more or less in the secular world and things of that nature. And then full circle, man, came back into ministry. And everything that I desired to do and build in the secular world as it pertains to, mainstream music and etc., God was able to allow me to do within the confines of church. So that's all I am. And that's, at the end of the day, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a leader in my community. And so, just doing what we can do to grow the kingdom of God first and foremost, and then secondarily to grow Black people, to see people of color come to a place of influence and respectability. That because I know that's who we are.
You know what? I love that you said that, because one thing I know for sure, you are a lover of being Black. You are a lover of all things Black, and believe in making sure that our people are making progress. And I love that about you. Here's what I know, and I know that you would agree with me on this, and that's why I love this conversation. I believe that every crisis is in need of leadership in order to be resolved. So when you consider crisis happening in communities, in homes across the nation and the globe, leadership is the answer to every major crisis. And when we consider our own contributions to some of the things that we see as challenges in our communities, I believe it's never been a better time to cultivate leadership capacity in people. And so I want to kind of jumpstart us here because I know that you've been leading for a long time, probably before you were afforded a position to do so, which is something that we've been talking about just on our journey, helping people to understand that leadership is so much more than position. It's really about influence. I know that long before you had the position for your leadership, you were already leading. And I'm interested in knowing and I'm certain, I was about to say if you could recall, but one thing I know is that you can recall. You got some kind of hard drive built into into you that you store these random things on, right? What is your earliest memory of leadership? When can you say that your leadership journey began?
First of all, it's a good question, man. I think for me, it's a two-part answer, right? There's the time when I'm cognitive of it, and then there's a time when looking back at it, I can remember people recognizing it. I was always that kid from every teacher that I had that was picked on to be the hall monitor. For some reason, in the class, they knew Kevin would get everybody in line. You know what I mean? And I'm talking about as early as second and third grade, right? That was like my thing. And whenever I went to the next year, promoted to the next grade level, that teacher would take that special interest in me and would use me as an exemplary student. Hey, everybody do what Kevin's doing, right? So I can remember that early on. But I think when I was cognitive, and this is a true story, around the time I was 13 years old, I played football and loved playing ball and whatnot. And we had this event where we're out here running, practicing. It's like not two-a-days, but more or less training, conditioning. But we had this thing called the fun run that happened every year with all of the athletes. And so we had to run like 2.5 miles around this little small area where our school was, and a lot of fun. But I was coming in, and as I came in, I began to cheer on my colleagues, my fellow teammates and whatnot. Come on in, man. You can do it. You can do it. You can do it. And I'll never forget, I wasn't that great of a football player. Boxing was my thing. And I'll never forget, the coach said to me, he said, he told everybody to come up on a knee. We all took a knee. He said, let me tell you something about Duhart. He stood me up. He said, Duhart, and it's going to sound hard, Duhart is not going to be a great football player. And I'm crushed. Oh, no. Now I can catch, I can tackle. It's just that when it came to, I had the IQ, I just didn't have the physicality, the size for that. Boxing was my thing. I was good with the hands, but when it came to the other aspect, I was decent. I just wasn't going to be a pro athlete, right? And so he's like, Duhart is never going to be a great football player. He said, but let me tell you what he is going to be. And I hope I can say this on your podcast. He's going to be one hell of a coach. He's going to be one hell of a coach. And when he said that, I remember everybody was like, wow. So after practice, my friends and I are talking. They're like, Duhart, he's right, man. You're going to be, man, I can see you. I can see you coaching. And at that time, I'm thinking like, wow, I could be a coach, not knowing that those words were somewhat prophetic. The undertone of that is he saw leadership in me. And I think that was the initial seed that was planted into my heart to let me know that what I had was something, this uncanny knack to inspire, to motivate, to push, to encourage, to correct, to celebrate, and to challenge. You know what I mean? And I think that was the first time in my cognitive mind that I accepted the idea that I was called to some form of leadership. Without language, I definitely knew that if I did something, at some point, people would follow me. I think that's when I came into agreement with it.
Now, that's so interesting because here you are in a predicament where one, it's like, well, I'm wanting my skills to just be recognized. I'm here to be a good, football player, and your skills really were being recognized in a different way, understanding that this capacity was in you to influence outcomes at that age. When you consider also leading and coaching, what I love about that story that you shared is that when you are an effective leader, there will always be people around you who are better than you at specific things, regardless. And sometimes that can be the hard part of the journey, because when somebody has a competency in an area of expertise that you may not have, there can be some difficulty helping them to understand the necessity of your role. And so I want to kind of just lean in there, and I know my wife will get us to our next spot of just kind of, I think that that's like a natural part of the conversation, because we have listeners who are tuned in today and they're struggling with this thought of understanding that they have been called or commissioned or assigned to a seat. That means that they have to find ways to move people forward in a direction, and they're dealing with people who may have competencies in areas that are above them. Can you talk about that just a little bit, how you navigate recognizing who you are, the necessity of your role in leadership, and how you do that when the squad around you happens to be better than you in specific elements of what it is that you're building? Now, that's a question.
Yeah. Well, first of all, good question again. I think for me personally, I had to come to the understanding, especially now in my journey, that gifts and skill sets can be leveraged, but vision cannot. What separates gifted and skilled people in most cases is vision, right? So if you have a clear vision, then God, or, you can hire, whatever, or, bring in contract individuals who have the skill set and the gifts to do what it is that the vision is demanding. And I think oftentimes we maybe put too much emphasis, especially those who are really gifted, into their just natural ability to do a thing and not understanding the sobriety of vision. Here's the truth, that each and every single one of us are gifted at something. Everybody has a skill set at something. Everybody has a talent. Everybody has a gift, but the gifts are not your why, right? Your gifts come to accompany your why, but they're not your why, right? So when you move into your frustrations, because I think leadership is about finding frustrations, finding calls. You mentioned that earlier at the beginning, finding your cause. And when you find your cause, you'll excel, because the cause is the why, right? And so what your cause is may not be my cause, but when you're in your cause, you're effective and influential. And when I'm in my cause, I'm effective and I'm influential. So I think the gifts and the talents that we have accompany the cause. And so what a leader has the ability and the responsibility to do is to be sober enough, right, to leverage the gifts and the talents around them for the purpose of the cause. Because people who are lending their gifts and their talents to the cause need vision. They need instruction. They need parameters. They need how-tos, right? And I think oftentimes instead of becoming intimidated, you have to see your vision as the reason why these entities or these persons and personalities and skill sets are being drawn to what you're doing. So I think it's important for leaders to be clear with their vision, because that's what people are signing up for. They're joining because of the vision. They're partnering because of the vision. They're applying because of the vision. They're trying to be there and partner with what you're doing because they can see themselves in that context. And for those who are, and here's one thing about vision as well, I don't want to say too much here, but vision will also weed out those who are not, what is the word I'm looking for? I don't want to use the word called to, but those who are not passionate about your cause, right? Because vision is that line in the sand. Vision says, hey, this is where we're going. And if you don't feel that this is what you're supposed to do, this will weed you out of that equation and that cause. And so that's how I've learned how to navigate. I've realized everything around me that's in my hand has been sent to me for the purpose of the greater cause. And when I realize that, I can employ you based upon the needs of the vision without being intimidated, more or less grateful. Wow, this level of gift is a part of my vision. Does that make sense? And I think when you have that mindset, people don't necessarily buck the leader. If anything, they embrace the leader because the leader has made room within the story for me to be a part, and giving me space and giving me voice and giving me power, because all three are necessary when dealing with gifted people. You need space, you need room to run, you need voice, you need to be able to have a seat at the table, and you need power. You need to be able to make a decision. And a strong leader has the ability to give you all three.
Wow, I think that was so good. Such rich answers. So I know you were talking about the importance of being able to communicate the vision, which I think is so true, because it's difficult for people to really rally behind you and move in a certain direction if they don't totally understand the vision. What could you say to a leader out there that may be struggling with the ability to communicate the vision to their people. Like they know the vision, they've internalized it, but they may not necessarily know how to effectively communicate the vision because it's like their people are having a hard time following them. What advice could you give to that person with how they could better do that?
Good question. I think one of the things that a person could do, especially if they have difficulty articulating or maybe put into words exactly all that they see, is to be able to staff a storyteller. And I'm not talking about necessarily financially, but there's someone around you. There is an Aaron to every Moses. There's someone around you who can speak the language of what it is that you're trying to iterate to God's people, or to your employees, to your company, to your nonprofit, whatever that looks like. There is an Aaron there, or another person there that can help you give language to that. So I think first thing I would do is I would find a storyteller. I'd find someone who's articulate, and I would make them or ask them to help me write out what it is that I'm trying to see, at least in the brokenness of what I see, right? And they can give language to what I'm saying. That's number one. Number two, and this is the difficult one, I think you need to be a person who reads books, because within the context of books, there is language. Language is found in alliteration. And so I think oftentimes those who do not desire to read or do not lend themselves to the discipline of study oftentimes find themselves having lack of vernacular for what it is that they're called to do, or feel at least their calls in the earth is for those people. And so I think finding a storyteller, or number two, looking at those who have already done what you're trying to do, or at least within the same vein, and looking at their language and then using that as a springboard into your own, right? That's the second thing that I would encourage someone to do. Thirdly, I would ask those who work with me, what do you see in the vision? Or what do you see in what we're doing? And I would bring them to the table, because I found personally that there's brilliance already around you. And if you believe in the sovereign nature of what we're all called to do, if that's your thought, whatever your higher power source is, then you have to know that you've already been staffed, at least for the season you're in, with the people necessary to get to where you're going. And so bringing those people to the table and saying, hey, this is what I have. How else can you help me tell this story, right? And I'm not talking about everybody, but those, at least a representation from every level, right? And bringing them into the opportunity, into the room with you to kind of help you unpack that, right? And so what happens is they get inspired. And now those same individuals who may have had difficulty trying to figure out what it is that they're doing with you in this vision are now rallying around it because they've added to it, number one. Number two, they're promoting it internally with those who may have felt or are feeling what they had felt. And so those are three things I would offer as suggestions to any leader who's listening, that if you're having difficulty communicating, get a storyteller. Number two, read books of those who have been in the same avenue, at least the same direction of what you're doing. Number three, invite your team to the table, and with the broken pieces you have, see where they see themselves within that context, and then what language they're adding to it at that time, collectively pulling it together. You never know what kind of magic's going to happen after that meeting.
Oh, that's good. Okay, so for the listeners out there, 'cause I know you mentioned about reading, which I love, 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 because as leaders, you always have to be in the seat of growing and learning and developing yourself. So what would be, like, if you could just recommend the top 2 books that you would suggest for leaders to read to help them to grow and develop as a leader?
Ooh, good question. I'm going to go very basic. Now, y'all know I'm a pastor. But I'm going to be very honest with you. Much of the entrepreneurial designs and thoughts that I have that come to my mind are inspired by scripture, period. It's just what it is. Maybe it's my lean in, my bend, but that gives me the integrity of how I build something, and the right heart and posture toward those who serve with me, people development, etc. I'm going to always say, for me, it has been the Bible, number one, period. Number two, though, believe it or not, it's a basic book, but it is the Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. When I first learned the laws of leadership and teamwork, that particular book is the red one. That particular book, Developing the Leader Within Me, that's what it is. Developing the Leader Within Me. That particular book changed my life. It was something about that ladder to leadership, right? The different levels that he talked about. And I began to see that in my own journey. And to this day, I can identify where I am on this ladder in that season of my life, right? And so those two books really gave me a lot of language. It was foundational, but it gave me foundational language about leadership, not just being something that, as Rose said a moment ago, not a position, right? But learning to lead or causing your team to help you lead them by permission, right? Going from position to permission. And when he talked about that in that book, that changed everything because now people development matters. I think the top of the ladder was personhood, but there's a place you can get to in leadership where your person is now leading, right? And so I recommend to this day, I know many of your listeners may have it, but at this point, many of them may not. But if you do not, I recommend you do get that book, Developing the Leader Within You by John Maxwell. Get the book, get the workbook. Since then, he's written so many more, but that one is the groundbreaking, most selling book I think he's had because it's powerful. And then you can advance to Stephen Covey and other writers. But I think you got to start there first. Revolutionary stuff, at least for me. That's what started me on the journey.
Oh, that's good.
I love it. Now, to me, you pivoted us to a place that I wanted to go to. I talked in the beginning about the fact that I love talking to you, okay? And my wife could tell you, I love it. I'm fascinated by our dialogues. I told you this before. I'm like, you know, when you talk to somebody, they just had a level of intellectual stimulation that you have in the conversation. And you need that if your mind moves in that way. Sometimes you just need to talk to somebody who can go there. And when we talk, I mean, we talk about everything from music to politics to church to culture. I mean, we are two very opinionated people. I wish you all could see the things we talk about. Some of it just ain't y'all business, all right? Because we have an opinion about things, and we do share those thoughts with each other. I think this, and I think that, and I think you probably would be fascinated. But I think what I enjoy the most about our dialogues is I'm always aware when we're talking that you've done a sufficient amount of study on subject matters. And for the most part, we don't explore as many conversations, I would say, around things that there is no study involved. We might trigger the desire to study a concept based upon bringing up the conversation. But what I love is that typically when I start a dialogue of any sort, you have some information about it. Something in you along the way had to develop this desire to learn, to get information, to digest what has happened in history, to inform what will happen in the future. I want you to answer this question in two parts for our listeners. One, what cultivated that hunger in you for information? Because when you talk about leading and leading well, you're not going to be that great of a leader if you don't train yourself to go and find information, right, that can trigger a certain amount of revelation for you. So I go and I become informed about a subject matter so that it will reveal something to me. So one, how do you train that desire? You know, you might say it was natural. If it was not natural, who helped you to cultivate that? And then moreover, how do you feel, or how would you suggest to newer leaders to create a rhythm around making sure that they are studying? Because that's going to help people to grow in their leadership.
Okay, well, first of all, good question. But let me tell your listeners right now, y'all don't be confused. Ronaldo Hardy is also a very well-studied man, and he knows a little bit about a lot of different subject matters as well. So don't get it twisted. He is a wealth of knowledge. He is brilliant. And if you're tuning in to this particular podcast, just know that this man and his wife, they have a whole lot to say, and they are game changers, period. You know what I mean? And so I want to make sure I put that out there. They are brilliant. I appreciate the flattery, but they're also very, very, very brilliant. Let me just say this. My love for information was not something that, it wasn't a decision I made. This is going to sound really hard. It was a decision made for me. When I was coming up, my dad was just a documentary guy, PBS kind of guy. He watched I mean, the news 2020, but I think it was more 60 minutes news, not 2020, 60 minutes. So my dad was big on stuff like that. And so I can remember coming home after playing ball outside, hooping with the fellas and whatnot, and coming inside as early as, I don't know, 10 years old. And my dad would say, hey, man, sit down and watch this with me. I'm 10. Sit down and watch this. And there might be a documentary on Vietnam or something like that. So what happened was over time, I started noticing within myself, again, middle school, that whenever I read stories, Texas history, things on United States history, government, whatever, as I would begin to read or watch documentaries, these people became real to me. They became real to me. And so, whereas one person's imagination would take them places, my imagination worked well with truth, facts, things that actually happened, recorded, eyewitnesses. And so I would reimagine what was written, right? And I think it just spiraled in me, and this played into the point where, especially being a person of color, because I think if you are an African American, I want to be specific, and your storyline in this country begins with slavery, and I think this thirst for who we are as a people, right? I think that also triggered in me around 15. I wanted to know, why is my last name Duhart? Who was the first Duhart? Where did that come from? And in order to do that, I had to learn how to dig, man. I had to learn how to dig. And I'm a lover of all things Black. And I love us. I love everybody, but I love us for real, right? And because I love us, you can't help but bump into the trauma of our history as you begin to study. And so I think that thirst for the historical context of African Americans in this country, that was met by my dad's, hey, sit down, watch this. Hey, sit down, look at this. Hey, sit down. And then as I became a man, knowing that I need to have an answer for every man, I wanted to make sure that whenever I had a conversation, I was that Black guy that when I spoke, it wasn't YouTube facts or barbershop banter. That when you heard from me, you didn't get this from the prison pipeline. You got this from a man who picked up a book, who read about it, and then checked his sources. I'm the guy that's going to cite where I got it from and who I got it from. And I think that's what it was. It wasn't the insatiable arrogance of trying to be correct. I just wanted to be informed. I just wanted to be informed. And I think even in the time I spent in corporate America, it was important in those rooms when I'm sitting around the table and people are talking about, especially politics, and we get into those discussions, they're giving you their talking points from talk radio. I went beyond talking radio. I wanted to jump into history of land, the geopolitical climate, et cetera, at that time. And so when I came to the conversation, I challenged your thoughts, you know what I mean? Because I gave you a more historical context. And I think that's what triggered that insatiable desire to learn, and not just to learn, but to learn correctly. And then number two, I felt like I'm teaching a people who might not have the opportunity or don't even know where to dig like I dig. And so that's the other part. I felt a responsibility to people of color, people who look like me. I got to be informed. If you don't want to be informed, and the only space I have for you, or the only time you're really going to pick it up is because you trust me, then I'm going to tell you, I'll do the hard work. I'll labor. You know what I mean? Just like the two of you, so I can share this information with you because you trust me. And I think the more you know, the more trustworthy you can be. We live in a culture now where if you can articulate foolishness well, it even sounds like truth. And so it's important to be able to articulate yourself in fact. And the only way to have fact is to have fact by history, and that you can fact check the history tellers as well. I hope I answered that question.
No, that was good.
I did my best with it, man.
Man says today, if you can articulate foolishness well, it can sound like truth. And that is how, people are operating. And, I feel like because of where culture is, it has eroded people's ability to trust the information they are getting, because they're learning later that someone who gave them the information did not give them the truth. And one of the best things that we can do is teach people how to be students information. And so one of the things I love, you kind of jumped ahead. I was going to go into the fact that you love genealogy and how all the stuff you go through to find information. You went through that journey. If somebody was trying to develop maybe a daily rhythm, digesting information, and they've struggled, like they haven't been a person that's been able to do it. Every time they open a book, they go to sleep. They just really struggle. Is there anything that you would offer? And I know my wife will get us our next step after this. Is there anything that you would offer to them and say, this is what I think that you should do? And just something that's practical, I think that would help them to train that part of them.
Sure. We live in a technological world, man. I mean, you have access to everything, right? And you have access to a wide range of ways to learn. And, your wife is an educator, Lisa is an educator. And so they both know that in that classroom, you're dealing with not just one learning style, right? And so in time past, I don't know if the education community was broad enough, right, to examine and to test and to even craft different types of learning styles around students when we was coming up, right? Now there's a wide range of teaching styles and etc. Maybe not all the tools, but at least they're identified. Let me give you an example real quick. I'm going to ask Christian a question. Christian, when was your father born?
Oh, he was born March 21st, 1949.
Okay, when was your mother born?
January 3rd, 1959.
Okay, right there, just by looking at your wife, at least from this screen, I could tell she is definitely good with audible learning. She's good with audible learning. What happened was while I was talking to her, psychologically speaking, I saw where her eyes went and she could recall how she heard it because they went toward the ears versus trying to see on the screen. And so I think people have to figure out, how do I learn? How do I learn? So you got audiobooks. You don't have time to sit down and read. You don't have to. You grab you an audiobook, and on your drive to the office, you can listen to chapter 1, at least half of chapter 1. By the time you get there, you can say that you finished chapter 1 of said book. If you're a visual learner and you need to see it that way, there's ways you can go to YouTube. And now I've seen certain books actually have a YouTube version of the book online with words and everything. So there's ways you can do it that way. And so, there's several different, ideas around learning that I think that people need to. Some people need a classroom environment. Some people need whatever. So I think if you have a daily regimen to get up, like a certain podcast you like to listen to, that's one way of learning. Like this one, Grow Black Leaders, is a way of learning. Then there are those who you can go to. If you're in the emails, a daily email from your favorite leadership guru, that's another way of learning. I recommend that you spend at least 30 minutes a day watching the global news. I'm not talking about CNN and Fox, but I'm talking about, some a little bit, maybe the BBC, some a little bit broader. So you can kind of understand what's happening from a global perspective. Because I think that those of us who live in America are somewhat arrogant. I think to really have compassion for the world, you need to have a global perspective. And so I think those are ways you can learn. And for me personally, when I get up in the morning and after I've done everything I need to do, check my emails and whatnot, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to listen to something in my AirPod. I'm going to turn it on, have it in my ear, and for about 25, 30 minutes, somebody is giving me information or game that I did not have the day before. That's my regimen on a regular basis. So I would encourage your leaders to, if you're a visual learner, find those things that can help you visually. If you are an audible learner, podcasts, audiobooks, things of that nature can help you, but commit to yourself that while I'm having my coffee, and Ro can tell you, while I'm having my coffee, I'm in a learning moment. Coffee time for me means I'm getting the game on something I didn't know before. That's part of my regimen.
I'm trying to move us along, but you just saying something. First of all, the fact that you were able to you were asking me questions, and then how you analyze my actions and how I responded, that you were able to determine what type of learner I am. And it is so true. I am definitely an auditory learner. So what I hear you saying is you have to eliminate all excuses, first of all, because there's no reason. You can't say you're too busy. You got audiobooks, you got what I heard you say, even while you're drinking your coffee, you can be taking in some information to help you expand your knowledge of different subject matters and aspects.
This man be studying Darwinism while he drinking coffee and Calvinist theology.
Wait a minute. I love that. He said something so good, and it was like, it became weighty to me. It was like, people trust you because of the knowledge that you have, and you it's like you almost sense a responsibility to make sure you're informed and you take in correct knowledge, because people trust you and they depend on you to be able to communicate and relate certain amounts of knowledge to them. And that was weighty to me, because it was like, as a leader, you sit in that position where people trust you, where people are really listening to what you have to say. So you have to make sure that you're doing your due diligence as a leader.
To say the right things.
Yes, to say the right things, because they are depending and looking towards you for that knowledge. I was like, whoo, man.
Oh, Lord. I mean, I just feel like we just all off schedule and all off track, but this is right on track talking to you, right? Couple of things I'm thinking. One, when all else fails, get you a friend like Kevin Duhart. Because like, if I don't have the answer, I'm gonna be like, hey, can you tell me about what's going on there? Right? You just need somebody that can do that for you. But I love what you just said about the whole responsibility part of leadership. And I know you said that earlier when you were speaking to us as well. I'd love to hear from your vantage point. What is the responsibility of leadership? What do you believe leaders need to be ready to accept as their responsibility if they're going to accept the role? Now, I just got myself stirred up asking that question, because I do believe that there's a disconnect. People accept the role, right? But they don't want to accept the responsibility. And if you're going to step into the role, you have to step into the responsibility at the same time. How would you articulate to those who are listening the responsibility or responsibilities of leadership?
Now, listen, I'm talking to predominantly Black leaders, correct? Okay, we're talking to everybody, but we're focusing on Black leaders in this conversation. So I want to piggyback on something my sister said a moment ago about the responsibility, right, of a leader, because you said it, that the more we know, the more consistent we know what we know, right? Then people do trust you. And so when I think about leadership from my seat, whether it's in the private sector, the nonprofit arena, corporate arena, the religious arena, education, etc., medical, etc., leadership is stewardship of stories, or story stewardship. And the reason why I'm saying that is because as I grow, as I age, as I mature, as I fail, I think about the fact that we're managing the stories of the corporation, we're managing the story of the vision, you're managing the story of the product, you're managing the story of the personnel. And that's where it gets challenging, because when people come to work and they show up to be a part of this cause or this vision or this business or whatever that looks like, they're coming from whatever they're coming from. And there are employees, there are partners, there are investors, etc., who have difficulties with their children, family members with diagnosis. And I think a sensitive leader, a wise leader, is going to be one who has to recognize and accept that when I step into this role, I'm not just communicating the needs of the business. If I'm going to be effective, I have to help manage the stewarding of these stories that are around me. So the needs of the business are one thing, but the needs of the people matter as well. And even in the private sector, you have to go beyond. There has to be a moment. I remember I worked for a bank. I won't say the name of the bank because they're not paying me, but I used to work for a particular bank, and the CEO of one of the largest conservative banks, financial institutions in the country at that time, would stop by my desk on Christmas, the week of Christmas, to give me a card. I mean, you recognize, now you have thousands of employees, but you recognize me. You saw enough value in me. Now, you may have passed out, 200 cards that day. I don't care. The fact that you individually wrote my name on this card, thank you for all that you do for insert name of bank. On our behalf, we appreciate you, Kevin, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That meant everything to me because you thought enough of my life, right? And if you're the smaller the team, the more involved you can be to some degree. Now there's levels to this, so you're not trying to, be all in everybody's business, but at the same time, you have to be sensitive enough to look for what's happening in the personnel. And I think the leader who cares for people will produce a team that cares about the product, about the vision, about the cause, and about the company. But if you don't care about the people, it's not going to benefit you well in the long run. These are companies where you see high turnover rates. Hey, my mom just got rushed to the hospital. I want to go. Well, you got to wait till 6 o'clock. We don't have nobody to replace you. Instead of saying, hey, do what you got to do. I'll jump in. I'll jump in. That's leadership. Leadership is ownership. Ownership of the mission, ownership of the mandate, ownership of the momentum, and ownership over the misses. So you got to have that responsibility within you. And I think a lot of people want the title, as you said earlier, Ro. They want the title. They want that position. They want it, but they're not graduating to that place of personhood. Leadership is being consumed with the ownership, not of the people, but of the mission, of the mandate, of the cause. And so that's how I define leadership at this point in my journey is story stewardship or stewarding stories. All of the above is important.
I love that. He said leadership is about stewarding stories. And, I often say, people want the prestige of the position without the responsibility of the role. And that is important. You cannot just desire prestige of the position. The responsibility of the role is more important. And another thing that I thought about as you were talking, and specifically talking about the value of making sure that the people understand your investment in them. I say this at our church a lot, and I've started to transfer this thought process into my work life as well in terms of sharing this thought process out. But I say that, we have to see people for their possibilities and not just their problems. Leaders who only look at people through the lens of their problems will suffer. They will struggle. You do well, you have the ability to see people for their possibilities, and the gap between their problem and their possibility is where leadership is required. You have the responsibility to move them from one end to the next. And where I'm not going to say most, a lot of leaders get frustrated with the problem. And I'm going to tell you, my wife can tell you, if you're on my leadership team and you keep coming to me with the problem that someone has, I'm going to get frustrated with you, because my thought process is this person has a possibility and you need to show me how you're going to lead them away from the problem. Now, there are some people who become so problematic that there's nothing that you can do for them. I'm not talking about that. But if your first thought process, even second or third, is that I'm just frustrated with this problem and I haven't seen you develop anything to get the person to their possibility, or that you have an awareness of their possibility, then I don't trust your leadership. Oh my Lord. I know you want to get us to the next step, because we caught up in this dialogue.
I was about to say, it's really going good. It's very, very powerful. So I know we talked about the responsibilities of leadership and how it's important to cultivate what you need, or the different skill set and knowledge to be able to have that leadership acumen that really allows you to lead people. But many times I feel like people have a misperception of what leadership really is. So from your vantage point, what is the difference between the perception versus reality of leadership?
Well, reality, we all know, is actuality. It's tangible. It's in front of you. Here's the challenge, though. Perception can be too. If you perceive a thing, and it can become true to you. Now, the hypnotism of perception is dangerous, because those are shaped before we even have our first leadership opportunity. Perception is shaped by experiences, it's shaped by trial, it's shaped by challenge, it's shaped by upbringing and the shapers that had their hands on you as you were a child. And so as you mature and as you grow, I think we mature in growth and physicality, in size, maybe even our bank accounts. But your view of the world is your perception. And here's the challenge. Most people we work with, their perceptions are not always reality. And that's a difficult space, because what do you do when you're gifted and you still have poor perception? And I've learned in a world or a culture that celebrates gift, we oftentimes put people in position to influence whose perceptions are broken. And so perceptive leadership is, I come into this thing with this belief system that this is how it's got to be. I'm concrete. It's muttered by my preferences, right? And then the actuality is, or the reality is, that's not real for everybody. We don't all share your perception. Let me tell you something. If there's anything that's going to kill a leader, especially in today's culture, it's preference. It's preference. Many companies do not exist anymore because of their preference. We refuse to go online and do this. Well, anything that ceases to change eventually will cease to exist. These are the facts. And so when I look at leadership in that context of perception, I think it's important that we have a healed perception. Now, how do we get to healing our perception? And I think this is the same for all of us, myself notwithstanding. I think this is for everybody. Is how do I heal my perception? How do I get to the point where I see things the way they're supposed to be? Number one, I think you should be open to your ideas being challenged.
Yes.
Now that right there is a hard one. Because now I have this brilliant idea. Man, I was asleep. I wrote this down on a piece of paper. Man, I couldn't wait to share it. And then someone says, well, how does that work in this context? Like, show me how do we, and now you're frustrated. You know what I mean? But I think in order to challenge perception, at least perception challenge, we're going to call this perception shattered 101, is you'd have to invite people to interrogate your vision, interrogate the way you do it. I think number two, you need to let people be open to critique how you lead. Now that's a hard one. No one wants their work to be critiqued or criticized. Criticism. But all criticism isn't evil. I know the culture teaches you that, but there's healthy criticism, right? And so I think asking safe spaces, going into safe spaces and asking safe people to, hey man, look at the way I'm doing this. What do you think? How can I be better? How can I improve? Right? I'm open to your thoughts on how could this have been done better? I know we got a victory here, but how could I have done that a little bit better? Hey, how did I manage that meeting? You know what I mean? Am I asking too less of our employees, or am I asking too much from those who work with us? So I think inviting people to critique in a healthy way, what it is that you're doing, what you have your hands to. I think that's one way we can help start shattering faulty perception. I think also, and it's the truth, if you fail to do that, then you'll retard and suspend your growth. Growth is always on the other side of criticism. Hey, and not just on the other side of criticism, but on the other side of acceptance of that criticism. You can't grow without accepting that this is something you need to change into. I'm going to say this and I'll shut up. Leadership is humility. It is. True leadership is humility. And influential men are, now when I say this, I'm not talking about false humility where you refuse to accept who you are. Accept it. You're a bad man. Accept that. You're a bad girl. Accept that you're gifted to lead in this culture. Accept that, right? But at the same time, be humble enough to accept that I'm not perfect. And as long as your posture is, I want to be better, then the critique won't hurt you as much. And that's a healthy perception. Yeah, because reality is this thing is messy. It's messy. Leadership is messy. Leadership is people. People is leadership. And it's messy. It is what it is.
I love it. And I tell you what, we are definitely having you back in season 2.
Absolutely.
Because one conversation is not enough to unpack all that I believe that you have to offer. As we land this episode, though, one of the things I love about wisdom is I feel like there's so much wisdom that we gain by looking through the rearview mirror. When we have that opportunity to look back, we have the experiences that we've attained. We have more information. Sometimes we have a greater sense or a level of maturity because we've gone through our maturation process. Looking in the rearview mirror, if you were looking back at younger Kevin Duhart and you had an opportunity to talk to yourself, I know that there's a lot that you would probably say, and it's going to be helpful to our listeners to hear. But if you had to say one thing to the younger version of yourself, what would you say?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. One thing that I would say to myself early on in the journey, I would say to me, take more risks.
Oh,
I would say take more risks. And the reason why I would say take more risks is because I think in safety, right? Looking back at it, when you're pioneering, right, something that you've never seen before, it's okay to pioneer. But I think for me, I pioneered in a lot of areas, but then looking back at it, I also craved safety. And what I've learned is there's no such thing as safety in pioneering. You are the blueprint. And so you will retreat to safety for a moment. You'll go back and huddle and then run back out there. And I think if I could go back to my younger self, I would say, hey, man, jump off the plane, parachute, take all the risk you can because you have the right heart for it. You have the right heart. Your motive is clean. So take more risks because your motives are right. That's what I would tell myself. Yeah, I feel that in my heart. I would tell myself, Kevin, take more risks. You have the right motive. Don't question your motives. Your motives are right. Take more risks.
That's good.
I know that stirred you up.
No, that's good. That is good.
As she could tell you, I love hearing that because it really is the way I live. It's a very interesting thing. Sometimes I think because I am willing to take risks, and they are calculated, many of them, sometimes it could feel like I'm just this fearless person. And I will say the older that I've gotten, the closer I think I've brought you into my moments of fear or apprehension. But something in me is wired. No matter what, I overcome that feeling and I'll take the risk. So I love that you said that because so many people are listening and their capacity is so much greater than their current placement or where they are. And they just really need the confidence to go after the thing. We're stretching in this season. And my wife was like, well, have you considered, what about this? And what about that? And I'm like, I've considered all those things. But I've also considered that there's a level beyond the next step that we're about to take that we desire. And we can't get there without being willing to go here. And so while I feel all of those things you're saying, I recognize that for us to go where we desire to go, we got to take the next step. And that looks like risk.
I agree.
But it's going to be rewarded. Look like you had something else to say on that. That stirred you up.
I was gonna say something that just to reiterate something you said a moment ago, but it just blessed me. I think it just landed on my heart very sweetly. Is that sometimes you have to be scared into success.
Oh my Lord.
That's good. That's good.
You know, we have to be
Felt
scared into it. Yeah. I want to tell you guys again, man, I'm super duper proud of in our time of building relationships, our family and your family. I can say this without it means unequivocal. You guys are two jewels to the world, to the financial industry, to education, but to our lives as well. You guys are special people, and I'm very proud of this opportunity, this moment, what you guys are building, and look forward to seeing this go everywhere to encourage people because I know you have the right motive, and I know you're not afraid to take risks.
Thank you so much.
Definitely. We love y'all.
But yeah, we feel the same way. We love you all so much, and we talk about those moments that God allows us to encounter couples that we love that way. You know, sometimes I can have a connection, she can have one, but it's so special when we encounter couples that we both are like, man, we love them and we love you all. Y'all, we have our own name for, they're the Duharts, we are the Hardys. So together we're the Duharties. We got our whole thing going. We just absolutely love you all. And I'm so grateful that you are a part of this on today, that you're a part of season 1, our inaugural season of Grow Black.
Hey.
And you will be back. I'm certain that you're going to be an audience favorite as well. So thank you so much for being with us on today. I'd like to say to the listeners as well, thank you so much for tuning in. We recognize in the hustle and bustle of life how busy all of us are. Any time that you choose to give to us is valuable time. So thank you for giving us some of your time today. We hope that you've been impacted by today's conversation. As always, do tune in. And also, I want to throw this in because some people may want to connect with you beyond this. So please let our audience know how they can follow you and stay connected to what it is that you're doing.
I am Kevin Duhart everywhere. That's KevinDuhart. That's on Instagram. That's on Facebook. That's on X. That's on, what's the other thing? Threads. I'm Kevin Duhart everywhere. It's consistency. Kevin Duhart everywhere.
Kevin Duhart everywhere. And we believe that pretty soon you're already all over the place, but you are going to be everywhere because you are definitely necessary. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today. We hope that you continue to enjoy the conversations. Until next time, we hope that you continue growing in your leadership.
Thank you for tuning in to Grow Black Leaders. Don't let your growth journey stop here.
Be sure to subscribe and visit our website, growblackleaders.com, and follow us on social media @GrowBlackLeaders.